Hello to everyone out there in listeners land. This is the Not So Common Sense podcast, the home of thinking often and questioning everything. I am your host, Marquita B. Critical thinkers, let's get into it. Hello and welcome back, critical thinkers. Today will be the last show of 2021, and we are going to be discussing a very controversial topic today. Today we're going to be talking about all things related to the jab mandate, just so much, just any and all topics related to the jab will be discussed today. Primarily because, like I said, this is controversial. I mean, in my opinion, it's definitely divided our country. But before we get into all the nitty gritty of that, I do just want to take a brief moment to say that I recognize that this virus is real. It's impacted a lot of people. And for that, I do want to give my sincere condolences to anyone that's been impacted by C-19. Like I said, this has definitely impacted and changed people's lives, some permanently because of this. So this is a very serious topic. I just wanted to reiterate that to let all those folks know out there that, I'm definitely thinking of all those that have been impacted. But moving on, without further ado, I just want to go ahead and jump right into today's topic. I'm sure all of us are aware that Biden and his administration mandated the jab for healthcare workers, private companies with over 100 employees, and federal contractors back in September. This mandate is currently up for review by the Supreme Court, and the review is set to start taking place on January 7th of 2022. My thing is, I have questions about this particular mandate, specifically how Biden selected these particular groups to focus on. The groups that I mentioned make up about 84 million people in the U.S. This is just a small subset of the estimated 329 million people that are in the U.S. altogether. So it's a very targeted group. I'm just curious to know how that came about and why those particular groups were pinpointed. I guess another question is, why don't these groups include the people who work for us, meaning the American people? I'm talking specifically about members of Congress and their staff. If you're not aware, the Biden mandate impacts federal employees, but not members of Congress or the federal courts. I'm grappling with trying to make that make sense. They get the choice of freedom to, decide whether or not they want to get the jab, yet the other groups in the 84 million, who are impacted by the particular mandate, they don't get the choice. So that's just, I just wanted to point that out. That's very interesting to me. With all of that being said, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit overturned 2 lower court decisions to block the mandate. Additionally, OSHA has announced that there will be citations for noncompliance, and those citations are set to start on January 10th. And the citations for noncompliance with testing requirements is set to start February 9th of 2022. So I guess I have more questions. If the Supreme Court is not reviewing the mandate case until January 7th, and the citations start on January 10th, that does not give the court a lot of time to hear all components of the case. So what does that mean? Does this mean that employers will start firing people prior to the court being able to make a final determination? I don't know. I'm just asking. If so, that's crazy. It's preposterous. I will say that I do know that several Republican states with opposition to the mandate for the jab have asked for those citation deadlines to be moved. But I will also note that as of the date that I'm recording this podcast, which is December 30th, this has yet to happen. So this is going to be very interesting as we move into the next week, week and a half. Will the citation deadline be moved? Will the court, miraculously come up with a determination on the components of this case within that 3 day time span, or really 2 day, between January 7th and prior to the January 10th citation start date? I don't know. I think they're all good questions, and I'm definitely curious to see if any of these things get addressed. The bottom line is that these mandates are really forcing employees and employers to make some hard and fast decisions. I mentioned in my podcast last month, one of my podcasts last month, that employees and employers were caught between a rock and a hard place. Well, folks, the rock and the hard place is officially here now that we have dates in place. The reality has hit us at this point, like it's here. Let's just talk about the OSHA noncompliance fines that I was referring to earlier for just a moment. Now, I did some digging and found that OSHA has fines and penalties in place currently. However, there is a chance that those fines and penalties for employers that don't comply and ensure their employees are jabbed or are undergoing testing, if employers don't comply with that, these are the OSHA fines I'm referring to that will be implemented against these employers. So let me just give you a quick rundown. The current fees that OSHA has in place were recently adjusted for inflation. I think back in May or June, they were adjusted for inflation, so that the figures that I'm going to throw out have already been adjusted and are the current figures as of today if fines and penalties were to be assessed on employers. Right now, per serious violation, meaning per person, employers are looking at $13,653 per single serious violation. So if you have an employee still working for you that is either not jabbed or has not undergone the, I believe, weekly testing, that's the fine that is going to be charged per person. In addition, there will be an additional $13,653 that will be charged to that employer per day that they fail to abate the violation. So for each day that they don't make changes and make sure that their employees are either getting jabbed or being tested, they're being charged the $13,000 figure on a daily basis. Additionally, for the willful or repeated violations that an employer has, so if they have, multiple violations, they're looking at a fine of $136,532 for those fines. So just keep those figures in mind for a minute, because now I'm going to talk very briefly about the Build Back Better bill, because this bill is requesting or proposing not only to give OSHA several $1,000,000 to help implement how they're going to manage and rectify how companies are complying with this new mandate, but they're also increasing the fees that will be assessed to employers for their noncompliance. So here we go. Serious violations, I just mentioned, are currently, as of today, set at $13,652 for employers that don't comply and make sure their employees are tested or jabbed. The Build Back Better bill proposes that serious violations per violation, increase to $70,000 per violation. That's huge. $13,000, almost $14,000 to 70 grand. That's a lot of money per violation, per person. In addition, they're proposing that for the willful or repeated violations that are currently $136,532, that the fine for that gets increased to $700,000. These increases are astronomical. I mean, if we just let's just think about that for a second. The reality is, with fines, I mean, the fines currently are already high. If the Build Back Better bill were to go through and those fines were to be increased to those higher figures I mentioned, I mean, it's really a matter of either employees being out of a job or employers becoming bankrupt by paying these fees. Just think about it for a second. If you owned a company, what would you do? To me, I think a smaller organization would probably end up having to fire a lot of people. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say for smaller organizations, they probably have a lot less capital to work with. They probably don't have an OSHA non-compliance fund, to take from. So they're probably facing the fact that they're going to have to fire a lot of employees, or they're going to have to fire any employee that is not jabbed or agreeing to getting the testing. On the other hand, for larger companies, I can definitely see the ability for them to possibly absorb some of these OSHA penalty fees. But I think at the end of the day, instead of being like survival of the fittest for larger companies, it would end up being survival of the job title, really. I say that because I think those in high ranking positions, like maybe director and up, or maybe not even directors, maybe like AVP level and up, companies may be willing to take the penalty for those positions because it's harder to hire and replace folks in those positions. Whereas if you think about people who are employed doing customer service, data entry, or just any, entry level or mid level job, I would assume that those positions would probably be on the chopping block. I mean, these are normally, especially if you think about entry level roles, those roles tend to have a high rate of people moving in and out of those positions anyway. So companies are probably already used to having to replace those people on a regular basis just due to turnover, or people moving up, or just moving to other companies and moving up, etc. So that's why I view that those areas will probably be on the chopping block first, and companies may be nice, or may have the funds to say we'll keep higher ranking jobs because they're harder to fulfill. But I don't know. We'll see. And at this point, all of this is in the hands of the Republican dominated Supreme Court. So we'll see what happens. I do want to note, though, that the mandate, like I said earlier, was stayed by 2 or 3 lower courts previously. So this definitely will be interesting. And it's also, let's just go back for a moment and think about Biden and his 2020 election campaign, in which he advised that he would never mandate the jab, as he did not have the power to do so. He's on record for saying that. Why do I think he said it? Well, because at the time he was familiar with the fact that doing so is unconstitutional. Yet here we are today. So it's ironic. And most recently, as of this week, December 27th, Biden was on a call. I think he meets with governors on a regular basis. And he was on a call on December 27th, 2021, and stated that there is no federal solution to C-19. He also stated that this should be solved at the state level. And he pledged to support and have the backs of the governors in any way that he could, as the states would need to take the lead going forward. All of this just came from Biden's mouth this week. So then I go back to asking again, why is he pushing this OSHA mandate? Why hasn't he lifted it if he's something that he stated he already didn't have the power to do? I'm trying to make it make sense, but it doesn't make sense. I'm hoping that his comments help the Supreme Court case against the mandate. I personally think it should. I mean, the fact of the matter is they're going to look at the Constitution and do all of that, pre-work, obviously. But I'm definitely hoping that his own, I mean, it sounds like he's going against his own mandate by saying that the states should be and need to be doing it, and that the federal government cannot make this situation better. I mean, let's be real. At the end of the day, the fact is that the states, via the governors of each state, hold the power, not the federal government. So hopefully that's what the Supreme Court decides. But let's just talk about the states for a minute. If you have taken a look at your own state's measures regarding C-19 and compared them to other states, you'll probably see very different rules. I mean, just from state to state in general. I do recognize that depending on your governor, the rules are going to be different. In other words, where you live matters. It determines literally how you live as it relates to C-19. People in each state are living a different version of this C-19. And this honestly has a lot to do with the political party that your particular governor is from. While I do admit that handling issues at the state level is not free of any issues specific to C-19, I do believe it is better handled at the state level versus a one size, fits all sort of sledgehammer coming from the federal government. I mean, at the state level, you at least have the option, to uproot and move to another state. Now, I get that that would be tough for many people to just uproot and move, but at least you have the option, especially for those that don't agree how things are being handled in their particular state. However, at the federal level, there's nowhere to go unless you want to uproot from your country altogether, which is even harder. In my opinion, handling things as it relates to C-19 at the federal level it's harsh and divisive. The country is already divided. And I believe the federal government needs to focus on pulling the country back together and bettering the economy. From what I've seen, the red states do appear to have better economies as they are not shutting businesses down. I'm sure you all can remember earlier this year at the height of, things going on as it relates to C-19, a lot of places were shutting down, mostly in Democratic states. However, in the Republican states, things have been more laxed, and they're allowing their citizens to make their own informed choices. Blue state economies are doing the opposite, and I think it's in part due to the stricter mandates. And this, in my opinion, will presumably get worse because if you look at what a lot of these states are doing now, jab passports are being required for a lot of public venues, eateries, movie theaters, etc. Anything that you want to do for entertainment or to have a social life, you're eventually going to need some sort of jab card in order for you to get in. In addition, the blue states are imposing these strict guidelines, and the policymakers, from what I've seen in several of these states, aren't even abiding by the rules. So not only do you have blue states where mandates are being pushed and required, but then you have people who are making the rules that are not abiding by them. So, I mean, you can name Pelosi, Newsom, Biden. I mean, there's so many people who have been to parties, they demand a mask mandate, but then go to parties and don't wear masks. The footage is out there. It's honestly the hypocrisy of it all for me. At the end of the day, bottom line, if you were imposing guidelines, you must be an example and follow them. That should just be the bottom line. That should not even be up for debate. But moving right along, we've definitely talked a lot about C-19. That's been the talk of the town for almost 2 years now. But I guess I also, I like to question things. I just question, why is this particular virus so different than any other virus? I mean, we can go down a list of viruses. HIV hit in 1991. That was a big thing. SARS, CoV, hit in 2002. H1N1 in 2009, swine flu in 2009 and again in 2015, Ebola in 2013, Zika in 2013, 2015, and 2016, Corona, MERS hit in 2012, and then now we have the SARS CoV 2, which is what we've been dealing with now since 2019. Why is this pandemic the only one that calls for a mandated jab? I mean, I just ran down a list of some of the prominent viruses we've dealt with in the past, I don't know, 30 years. You may notice that even some of them, I mentioned multiple dates for them. Well, why did I do that? Well, it's because the virus did what viruses do. They mutated and came back around and hit us again. Well, why did it happen? Again, that's what viruses do. And C19 and all of its variants are no different. All viruses mutate and evolve. That's how they survive. I mean, just think about it. There's been a different strain of the flu every single year. And even in given years, multiple strains of a flu. When if you get jabbed for the flu, you're told, that you can go out there and review materials on the effective rate depending on the strain that you have for that year. But with all that going on, with the latest surge of Omicron variant, I do find it interesting that the CDC has decided to roll back the isolation period. So again, at the height of C19, we were looking at a 14-day period for you to stay at home and be by yourself and get well. Then earlier this summer, it was changed to 10 days to stay at home, get yourself well, stay away from other people. And recently, as of a couple weeks ago, actually a few days ago, it's now been changed to 5 days. Now, again, I'm asking questions because this appears to be contradictory and disjointed. Something isn't right. The right hand is not talking to the left. This is a bowl of spaghetti. I mean, because you have Biden coming out and saying one thing, you have Fauci saying one thing, the CDC saying one thing, the Omicron surge is being reported all over news outlets, and the long lines at testing sites can probably be seen in every city. Are all of these things are doing or saying something different? It's confusing. I don't know how anyone couldn't be confused. I do a lot of research looking into it, and I'm still confused. You can't claim that say that something, this particular variant is so terrible and that there's a surge and there's an increase and we should be worried, but then cut the isolation period. Make it make sense. In addition to that, I then question about these jabs. Well, which variant does the jab address? I think that's a fair question. Wouldn't it just be addressing the initial version of C19? However, if that is the case, we have to consider the fact that this thing has mutated several times already. So we've had alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and omicron. We're honestly about to have the whole Greek letter system in a minute of different variants. So I ask, how in the world does the initial jabs that were offered by Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson, and Johnson & Johnson, how do they account for this? Based on my findings, it's being reported that yes, the jab works to some degree on these variants. But then I'm like, well, how is that possible? How did the pharmaceutical industry know how C19 would mutate and thus account for those in a jab? But you know what? I'm just going to let that stay there. I'm going to let that lie. I'm not going to go too deep on this platform because we already know how YouTube is. But please just think on that for a minute. I'm going to let it go though because censorship is real, folks. I will just add that the boosters are listed as likely being able to add additional protection to the variants. So My critical thinking tells me it does not appear that booster jabs are meant to address the variants specifically. This is probably also the reason why the CDC has not made the determination that fully jabbed includes boosters. So then, again, go back to my earlier comment. That means that the initial jabs that were created by those three companies, in some way, shape, or form, is accounting for the variants already. But again, I ask how, but I digress. But let's just talk about this for a minute because there have definitely been reports of jab wear off rates. I have read several medical journals and articles recently on this topic, and it appears that the jab effectiveness wanes after about 6 to 8 months of receiving it, which is probably why the boosters are recommended after 6 months. But from a longevity perspective, that is a short amount of time considering jabs like the chickenpox are known to last for 10 to 20 years. Tetanus lasts for about 10 years. And the measles jab lasts for a lifetime. Now, we've already discussed how C19 and its variants are the first time that a jab has been mandated. But the time frame is off. Was it a rush to get something put out there that maybe is not as effective as it could be? I don't know. No idea. And then recently you have, folks like Trump, who everyone is aware of, has had an opinion about the jab. I think it's funny, but recently Biden in a speech thanked Trump and his administration for getting the jab out to the public, created and out to the public so quickly. Later in different appearances, Trump quickly accepted the praise, including an interview that he had with Candace Owen, where he pushed back on any negative information about the vaccine. Additionally, in an interview with Bill O'Reilly, Trump confirmed that he received his booster. Of course, Trump's feelings about the jab, his recent comments about it, definitely upset many of his supporters. I will say he believes in the jab, but opposes the jab mandate. But honestly, who cares? At the end of the day, I'm not really sure why people are upset. Everyone has an opinion about the jab and C19, etc. That was his opinion. None of us should care about how any politician honestly feels about it, whether they're pushing for it or not. We should all be in tune with our own individual thoughts and views about it, based on our own biblical principles, religion, research, whatever you believe in, and keep politics and political views and opinions out of it. That's just my opinion. But again, I digress on that as well. Let's just talk briefly for a minute about tactics. Now, the tactics have definitely been something that has sparked my interest since the earlier part of this year when the jab became widely available. I'm talking tactics for people to get the jab and to receive things such as free childcare, to partake in $1 million lotteries, paid time off, free donuts, free hunting and fishing licenses, free beer, 10 packs of free oodles and noodles to the incarcerated that receive it, gift cards, money being offered to not just adults, but to children, which I find that one really insane because don't the parents have to give permission for the child to do it? So you can't just say, here, Johnny, here's some money, go ahead and get jabbed. Like, it doesn't, I don't even know why they're offering anything to children, but whatever. AirPods, bags of weed, joints. I mean, the list of what people have been offered to receive in order to get the jab in 2021 is insane. The list goes on and on. Just Google it. You will honestly be amazed. But I'm not here to condemn. I'm really not. I'm just here to relay some facts and information so that people can make their own educated choices and really do their own research and make their own choices. Listen, everyone has to do what's right for them at the end of the day. We all need to do what we believe is the right and safe thing to do. And none of us should be ridiculed for our choices. None of us have been ridiculed about jabs in the past. At least I missed the memo if that has occurred. I've never seen that occur. This jab or not to jab is causing way too much division in homes, families, etc. In workplaces. It's just unnecessary. Bottom line, if you want to get the jab and the boosters, get it. But don't feel as though you're being forced to do something that is against your beliefs, or something that is coming as a directive from a politician, or is something that goes against the advice you've been given from your healthcare physician. And with that, I'm going to end my commentary here. I will say that I am one of the 84 million that are being potentially impacted by and are facing the Biden administration's OSHA mandate. But for me, answering the to jab or not to jab question was very simple. Due to my sincerely held religious beliefs, I've chosen not to. While my employer will have the opportunity to make a decision about my employment, I am content with and have faith in the decision I've made. So regardless of what they say, I'm internally happy with the decision I've made. I've made my decision because man does not dictate what I do. Rather, my Lord and Savior, the Bible and its biblical principles, and my conscience dictate what I do. And they guide me each and every day. And I will have no one, no man, no nothing impact or change my view on that. But with that said, as always, please share your thoughts on my commentary and in the comments below. I wish nothing but blessings to all my listeners. 2021 may be coming to a close, but I wish you all to become more healthy, wealthy, and wise in the new year. Happy New Year, everyone, and bye-bye for now. Hey, critical thinkers. Thank you for listening to the Not So Common Sense podcast. Please help elevate this podcast by either liking, sharing, or subscribing based on your listening platform. Until next time, be blessed, think often, and question everything.